Welcome to this explainer. You know, if you've ever been deep in the weeds of research, just desperately trying to build an airtight bibliography without losing precious points to formatting errors, well, you already know that citing a standard book is pretty straightforward. But a corporate press release? Oh man, that is exactly where things get completely murky. Suddenly, there isn't always a single human author. The dates are kind of confusing, and formatting the whole shebang feels literally like trying to solve a puzzle in the dark. It's a really specific, frustrating challenge that stumps even the most seasoned researchers out there. But hey, don't worry. Today we're going to break it down completely and transform that confusion into total clarity using some exact source rules. Let's dive in. Okay, so let's tackle the first major hurdle right out of the gate. Who actually gets the credit when the author is just this faceless corporate monolith, right? Usually we scour the top of a text for a person's name, but a press release? That is almost always cited under the organization or the named author that issued it. That is your starting point. Say you're citing a massive new product announcement from Apple. If Apple issued the release without a specific PR person's byline on it, well, then Apple, the corporate entity itself, becomes your author. It's kind of a fundamental shift in how we assign credit, moving from an individual writer to the issuing organization as the definitive voice of the document. Now, I want you to think of a full citation as a meticulously crafted 8-piece puzzle. Seriously, you absolutely cannot skip a single piece if you want a flawless reference. You're going to need the big foundational pieces first: the issuing organization or named author, the exact release title, and the year. But then you also need the really granular details to lock it all together. That means grabbing the specific label press release, the full exact day the announcement went live, the issuing organization again if it differs, the URL where it actually lives online, and finally, the specific date you accessed it. When you lay all 8 of those out, boom, you've built a precise map that leads your reader straight back to your original source. But hold on, you certainly don't want to dump all of that heavy, chunky data into the middle of a flowing paragraph. That would be a total nightmare to read. So the rule for handling this in text is beautifully, wonderfully simple. Whenever you reference the material in the actual body of your writing, just use the organization or author and the year. That's it. Just those 2 things. So, following our earlier example, it would simply be Apple 2024. See, it keeps your writing super clean, totally uncluttered, and highly readable while still pointing perfectly to that detailed 8-piece reference waiting patiently at the very end of your document. All right, listen up, because here is one of the most common traps researchers fall into, literally confusing the messenger with the source itself. Imagine a journalist writes a really cool news story based on a recent NASA press release about a Mars rover. If you read that journalist's story, you absolutely must cite it as a news article. You cannot cite the original NASA press release unless your eyes actually read that original document over on NASA's website. Your citation must always accurately reflect the exact document you interacted with. So, golden rule, never cite the original corporate source if you only read a summary of it. And to build on that whole idea of absolute accuracy, our source lays down a strictly non-negotiable rule of preservation. It says, preserve the official title and date from the issuing website. This means absolutely zero paraphrasing, none. When you're collecting those puzzle pieces we talked about a minute ago, you can't just adjust the title to sound a little better, and you definitely can't tweak the date to fit some different format if it risks changing the meaning. No way. You have to capture it exactly as the issuing website presents it. This strict literal adherence guarantees that anyone reviewing your work can verify your facts without a single shadow of ambiguity. So, how do we actually do this? Let's turn all these meticulous details into a real actionable workflow. Now, yes, there is a very powerful shortcut available to make this whole thing way easier, like using the Harvard Reference Generator over at harvardreferencegenerator.co.uk. But there's a catch, and it's a big one. Step 1 is entirely manual. You must verify the corporate author, the release date, and the original URL yourself. Only after that human verification is complete do you move on to step 2 and let the tool do the heavy lifting to generate the formatted reference. It's the ultimate case of trust but verify, right? The automation is there to save you time on the formatting for sure, but the responsibility for the factual accuracy, that rests entirely on your shoulders. Which actually brings us to a really fascinating final thought for you to ponder today. If citation generators still require our manual verification of the corporate author, the date, and the URL first, well, where does the tool end and the true researcher begin? We've seen today that citing a press release isn't just about mindlessly plugging data into a machine, right? It requires active critical thinking to identify the real author, to distinguish between a news article and an original release, and to preserve exact titles.
Tools can absolutely assemble the final product, but the true foundation of academic integrity, that's built by you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep those critical thinking skills sharp, and I'll catch you next time.